Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Next Man Up, two-man combo show. We'll have some check-ins coming around, but before we get into it, we do not have Johnny on with us on the show this week because our good friend Johnny is getting married this weekend. So, congratulations, Johnny. We let us be the first to congratulate you on your wedding this weekend. So, best of luck. Hopefully everything goes well for you with the wedding and you have a beautiful weather for you this weekend. So congratulations to our friend Johnny and, enjoy every second of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Big congratulations and Sante to the very soon to be Personowskis. So congratulations to both of them.
But as you just heard, that is Nikki. He's joining me. I'm Chris.
I'm
I'm here with
back.
Nikki. He's
I'm
back.
back live. I
He's
missed
back
you
live, not
guys.
checking in with us. Um, but so as I said, it is another edition of Next Man Up, another week, and yet another Jets headline. It is the Jets bye week, but they can't stop staying out of the headlines. We got another bombshell dropped on us today, mere like maybe an hour before we started recording this. The Jets have officially fired Joe Douglas, whose contract was up at the end of the season. Basically, everyone thought he wasn't coming back next year. The writing's been on the wall for him. And Nikki, I'll get your viewpoint as an outsider before I give my opinion on this. What is your thoughts of the Jets, getting rid of Joe Douglas mid-season, going into week 12 in their bye week? He gets fired on his day off. What's your thoughts on that? And then I'll give my 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we've been pretty lucky this season with getting a lot of headlines breaking before we record. So it's a big
And
turnaround
somehow
from last.
they always seem to be with the Jets for some reason.
Well, I mean, as you and I said right before we came on the air too, it's there's one thing the Jets can do right this year. It's that. But I mean, from an outside perspective, I mean, especially from how you've been talking about the team this year and just seeing the dysfunction of everything play out once again. It's very fitting. It's kind of funny that both Robert Saleh and now Joe Douglas have been fired on a day off this season. I'm not surprised that it's an in-season firing for the GM position. I'm assuming whoever the assistant general manager is will take the interim spot, unless Woody Johnson thinks his brother goes in. But I've got some other views um, for what I think they could do for that spot after. But I want to get your opinion on this too before we go a little further into that.
Yeah, I mean, my thought process is, as it he's was not being retained after the season. His contract was up at the end of the season, as I had mentioned, and so he's been with the team for 6 years now. So this is one of those things where 6 years ago, Woody Johnson was not with the team. 6 years ago, what also happened was so 6 years ago, Woody Johnson was not with the team. He was an ambassador under Donald Trump's administration.
Mhm.
He handed the keys to Christopher Johnson, his brother, and Christopher Johnson was making all the moves. Woody signed off on the moves, but he wasn't technically allowed to be a part of the discussions with people. He had basically he was, I think that there's some sort of rules against it when it comes to certain things. So he handed the keys to his brother, and that was the case. So he didn't make these hires. Both him and Saleh were not hired by Woody, and there was like an air about it when he fired Saleh. He said, my brother hired you, I didn't. You were not my hire. I signed off on it, but I was not the one who hired you. That very well could have been the same thing that he said to Joe Douglas.
Yeah.
Because I said 6 years ago he was not the one who essentially hired him. So that being said, there's a lot of things being said that Woody Johnson is once again going to get an ambassadorship now that, you know, Donald Trump was elected president. He was in his ambassador under his presidency last time. So that being said, this sounds to me as if Woody Johnson is trying to get his fingerprints all over everything before that said ambassadorship occurs. So he wants to have his fingerprints all over everything. They want to get a head start on it. Does it make, if you're not retaining someone, does it make sense to get a head start on something? Sure.
Mhm.
But given the circumstances and everything surrounding the team where it was, he's not going to be with the team at the end of the season, essentially. That's kind of where it stinks a little bit more because Woody's fingerprints, once again, are all over everything. A lot of things have blown up in their faces, but were they all Douglas's fault? As I've said, Woody has meddled a lot when it came to decisions that essentially should be the GM's decision to
Mhm.
make. When it came to the quarterback, Woody was the one who essentially forced Rodgers on Joe Douglas. That started a chain reaction that caused a lot of other decisions to be made, from hiring Nathaniel Hackett to signing Alan Lazard to forcing a trade for Devontae Adams to a lot of other decisions that were made because Aaron Rodgers was forced on him by Woody Johnson.
Right.
You know, so was it all Douglas's fault? No. Does he shoulder zero blame? No. Am I surprised that this move was made? Even without Rodgers being in the fold, I think this would have been the decision that was made because outside of the one draft class that he had with Sauce, Wilson, Johnson, and Hall, those four picks, great picks. Outside of those four picks, his later draft decisions have not been the greatest. Braylon Allen this year, has shown flashes, but outside of that, Malachi Corley, what has he done aside from drop the ball on the 1 yard line? Um, where has his drafting ability really gone? He's the GM that drafted Zach Wilson. So where are his redeeming qualities as GM really been? He got fleeced by the Eagles on multiple occasions. The Hassan Reddick, bungled deal. So there's a lot of things that you could definitely point the finger at Joe Douglas where that was his fault. So I don't fault the team for moving on from Joe Douglas. The timing of everything really points to Woody's not going to be there at the end of the season, so he wants to have his say on everything before the decisions are made. So it's a full cleaning of house. There's complete disarray. It's a downward spiral. It's been a downward spiral. This team was completely taken off life support after this loss last weekend. So it's just a big mess, and it's always a mess. And the Jets just love being in the headlines. That's the one thing, as you said, that they've done right is make the headlines this year, even if it's for bad reasons.
And with that too, I mean, it's kind of funny. You mentioned a couple of the guys that Douglas has picked, so I want to get your opinion on who you think were, if you could choose one, or if you had to go with the top three during Joe Douglas's tenure, who would you say were his best draft picks? And then on the flip side of that, if you could pick maybe one person for a free agent signing, who would that have been for, or a trade? What do you think was the best that he did for those aspects?
I mean, it's hard to not say that one draft class as a whole, the Sauce, Wilson, the trade back up to get Jermaine Johnson at the end of that first round. I was
Mm.
like, that's what happened before. I think the Jermaine Johnson pick, yes, he wasn't the one that won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Garrett Wilson he won Offensive Rookie of the Year that year with Sauce Gardner winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. I really think that Jermaine Johnson pick was the one that was my favorite of the group because he traded back up. I thought it was a great trade to get back up. And he's also the one that made that trade with Seattle. Let's not forget that. So that trade to get Jamal Adams out of here to get those 2 first-round picks was an absolute masterclass of
Mm.
trading that got you 2 first-round picks for a player that, what did he do for Seattle? And now he's just a free agent, has made his way to 4 different teams. I think like
I
3 or 4
forget
different
where
teams
he
and
is.
has done nothing for it. He got cut by the Titans
That's
after
it.
doing absolutely
That's
nothing.
that's right.
So you look at the fleecing that he did of Seattle when he got rid of Jamal Adams. So I mean, when it comes to trades, that trade right there was
Mhm.
a masterclass of a fleecing. So basically everything that surrounded that trade right there, I would say is really what it comes to, because Aga got us, Garrett Wilson. It helped us get Elijah Vera Tucker. And I think that some of the picks in there also helped us get Jermaine Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that basically everything that surrounded that Jamal Adams trade was like, you know what, that was the best move that he ever made as a GM for the Jets. So I
Mhm.
think that was an absolute masterclass right there. But then when you look at on the flip side of everything on the bad, you look at the whole Hassan Reddick thing that we've talked weeks about this year, where they made the deal for him without a deal in place with him for an extension, and the guy doesn't play for 6, 7, 8 weeks, however long it took him to play. So how different would the defense have been had you had the pass rush coming from both sides with him and Johnson until Johnson got hurt? Then you have him and McDonald right away versus, how long would things have developed? How different would that pass rush have been? The pressure that you're getting on the quarterback, because they had almost no pressure on the quarterback for weeks at a time. So how different would that have been had they had Hassan Reddick with a proper deal in place once they traded for him? So that was definitely a fumbled bag in that regard, from the GM standpoint.
Yeah, and from an outside perspective too, just for the future, whoever the new GM is, whether they do make the assistant the full time or they go with an outside hire, I think the best thing possible for this next GM of the Jets is to look at Woody and Chris Johnson dead in the eyes and say, "Look, I understand you guys are the highest of high ups here in the organization. I respect that, but in all seriousness, F whatever you guys think. I'm going to go out and do what I want to better this team because for too long, what you guys have done has been holding this franchise back and keeping a lot of potential success down from what they have. And that's the best thing that whoever's in that chair can do to try with as much respect as possible for ownership without trying to step over any lines and get themselves fired. But be that person that bucks the system that the Johnsons have in place to try and get the right people in the certain positions to give it success. Because I mean, we talked about it before the season even started. On paper, the Jets looked like they were gearing up for a good run this year. They were going to challenge Buffalo to for that number one seed in the AFC East. And you said it. You said it was basically a Super Bowl or bust. But
Yeah, I mean, I had them in the AFC Championship game. I mean,
right,
I didn't
right.
have them in the Super Bowl, but they were built to be a team that was essentially going Super Bowl or bust. And then this is probably the biggest disappointment of a season, not just for the Jets, but for in the NFL, in NFL history, is one of the biggest disappointments
Yeah.
that a team has ever had.
Yeah, it's weird too. It's I mean, I goof on myself for being a Jets sympathizer earlier this year, but I mean, but it's just from the outside looking in too to see the talent that they have, and it's almost like with Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson, and I mean, Lazard has been good for them this year up until he got hurt, but with those two young guys, Hall and Wilson, who are guys you'd want to build that offense around, having Rodgers there and the lack of quality that he's putting out now, he's a shell of himself and then some. And it's a waste of that young talent on the team. And it's Tyler Conklin too. He's another guy who's been very impressive for them this year. But just something's gotta change for whoever the new person in that seat's gonna be after this season. They really gotta push against what the Johnsons want and tell them this is in the best interest for the team.
Absolutely. There has to be a balance of power, and they have to realize that when they do make that hire. And hopefully that comes out in the interviews and just as you said, someone has to look them in the eyes and say, I understand that, what you say essentially goes, but there has to be a mutual respect that you have to let me do my job. And that really is what has to happen. And so, that being said, I don't want to harp on it too much because I don't want to make it, the Jets show again.
Yeah.
But staying in the AFC East, we did see, you mentioned the team that they were trying to compete with, the Buffalo Bills.
Yes.
They got the win against Kansas City. Kansas City's no longer undefeated. Now, in regular season matchups, Buffalo has had Kansas City's name. They've
Mm-hmm.
had their number. I think now 3-1 or 4-1 against them in the regular season over the last 4 or 5 seasons.
I think it is 4-1. Yeah.
They're 4-1 now in the last 5 seasons, counting this season, but they're 0-3 against them in the postseason. So, what do you think it is that makes it so different when these teams face off in the regular season versus the postseason?
I think with maybe with regular season, it's almost as, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm accusing the Chiefs of just slacking off because they don't. They work their tails off every single game, but maybe they have a little bit more of a relaxed approach to that matchup in the regular season. And then when it comes playoff time, they know how to flip that switch, that like essentially that kill switch to go in there and do whatever they have. to me, this is very reminiscent of the Patriots Colts rivalry back when it was Brady and Manning going against each other, and both facets of that matchup. Patriots dominated the regular season and the postseason, but you knew those games were always going to be entertaining, and it's just that I think it's that thing where you have that team that, like I said, it's just got that one switch they know how to flip and just turn things around for them, especially when it matters, when it's win or go home. And I think that's something, if it comes down to that again this year, Buffalo needs to do whatever weird analogies that Sean McDermott needs to pull out of nowhere, that maybe a little more appropriate analogies. Let's not forget what their record is now through the first 11 games. I'll just say that. But it's something to try and wake them up and have them flip that switch instead of Kansas City doing it in the playoffs. But I said it too after this game. Buffalo did what no team has done to Kansas City yet this season, and through their previous 15-0 undefeated streak, is they kept their foot on the gas the entire time, and they did not stop until that final whistle blew. And when Josh Allen on that 4th and 2 just blow through everybody, run to the end zone, that sealed it right there, and I was jumping up and down for that.
Absolutely. And what Buffalo did on offense too, I really liked watching what they did because, they could have settled for like a field goal, but no, they go for it, on fourth down, they could have given the ball back. No, they go for it. They stepped on the gas. They kept their foot on the gas, because if you ever give Patrick Mahomes a chance, he's going to make you pay for it.
Exactly.
And
they've
learned that lesson.
Too much time.
They've learned that lesson. So, you keep it a 2-score game as long as you can, because as long as it's a 2-score game, you have more life on your side than the other team does.
Absolutely.
Because you never want to let it be a 1-score game against Patrick Mahomes, because as long as he has the ball, he's going to win that game. End of story.
Yeah. And it's not just with Kansas City has I think they have more overall talent, not just at receivers or with Travis Kelce, but everybody on that offensive side of the ball for the Chiefs, I think, is more talented than what Buffalo has. But Buffalo, for the past 5, 6, 7 seasons, has been a good team. And it's just they found that way to win in this. So you can definitely tell for both teams it was a team effort from both teams, and in the end, just Buffalo was the better one at the end of the night, and it made for a great game on Sunday.
Absolutely, that was definitely the marquee matchup of the week. And when it comes to teams that did not take their foot off the gas, Detroit,
the
Lions, 52-6 against Jacksonville. Jared Goff put that 5-interception game behind him from the week before, and they just lit up the scoreboard, and they did not stop.
And then some.
And then some. So 52-6 against Jacksonville, a Mac Jones-led Jacksonville team that is just completely lifeless in the AFC South, in the AFC in general. And it's just Detroit is now the favorites. They're the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl after Sunday. Believe it or not, because Kansas City lost. Detroit wins very convincingly against a very inferior opponent nonetheless. But 52-6 makes them the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl. Would you say that they're your favorite to win the Super Bowl, or are they not your favorite to win the Super Bowl? And I will have another question for you as the outcome of this game, but what's your thoughts on Detroit? I know we talked about them. We think that their offense is amazing. They can, they're the team that nobody wants to play. Are they hitting their stride too early, and will this fizzle out down the stretch? Or do you think that this is really just the juggernaut that we're just going to watch, full speed all the way to the end?
I think, first off, I'd say right now, Detroit is probably my favorite to win the Super Bowl. I think the way they've been playing this season, and yes, Johnny has talked about the indoor-outdoor stats for Jared Goff, but no matter what, it seems that it's a complete team effort for this Lions team again this season. And I think they're even better than last year. I think they're hitting their stride at the right time too, because I feel like they can of certain teams, they're one of those teams, like, we'll go back to them, Kansas City, where if they know a certain moment where they can hit their stride and they can ride that momentum all the way to the end of the season, and into the playoffs. So I feel like they have a really good chance of doing that. It's just about tightening up their scheme. Obviously, Dan Campbell was very liberal with his fourth down conversion attempts last year, and for the most part, it worked out. The Lions had one of the best fourth down conversion rates in the NFL, but ultimately, that's what cost them in the end in the playoffs. But I think learning from those mistakes and just each week, they seem to get better and better each week. And again, that Campbell has that locker room in the palm of his hand, and they have fully bought into what he's been doing with them ever since he took over as the head coach of that team.
Absolutely. The culture that Dan Campbell has built there is definitely unmatched. That's what you need in a team, is the culture that he's built. Everyone has bought into it, and they really are just the unstoppable force right now. Everyone there just loves to be there. They've gone from the laughing stock of the league, the 0-16 team, the 1-15 team. They were just the team that was a joke, and now they're they are the favorite to win the Super Bowl, which is just crazy. And then on the flip side, in that game, Jacksonville, they lose 52-6. Doug Peterson, he won the Super Bowl with the Eagles and Nick Foles. That he will always have that.
You were
memory.
at my house for that game.
I was at your house for that game, and I was kind of dancing on your grave. I didn't really feel bad about it.
It's okay.
Honest.
We won next year, anyways. It's fine. I'm fine. We just sandwich in between two.
Yeah, right. But that being said, this team does not have Trevor Lawrence right now, who they just gave the big contract extension in the offseason. So there's two questions. We're on a day where someone was fired from their job in Joe Douglas, and Doug Peterson has still not been fired from Jacksonville. We've been saying every week, when's Doug Peterson going to get canned? The Cons have not kicked Doug Peterson to the curb. You said yesterday, they don't know when to fire coaches. They kept Urban Meyer longer than they should have, when he still got fired in the midst of his first season.
It's getting close to that time where he was fired.
The fact that you say that Urban Meyer was kept longer than he should have been and he was still fired in his first season is just laughable in itself.
Yeah.
But how much longer does Doug Peterson just stay on to the end of the season at this point? And then also, with the state of Jacksonville and the contract that they gave Trevor Lawrence, do they just sit him the rest of the year and risk, injury to that investment that they made? Or do they protect their investment?
I mean, as far as they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 6 games left in the season for them now. As I pull up their schedule here,
are they on a? I think that they're not on a bye this week. Are they on a bye this week?
They are on a bye this week.
So if there's a week to get rid of Peterson, this would be the week to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Jets did it with Joe Douglas. Why can't they do? But I mean, I've said it off air too. I think this is also and I've said it on the show before. This is a front office thing. This is not fully just a team thing. You have to look at the Cons for not pros and cons, but the Con family for this too, because I think part of it is Shad may have been too enamored with. He's a former Super Bowl winning coach, and he'll get us a good spot. But then also with Trevor Lawrence's contract, it goes to, yes, the market has gone up over the years and everything, but it goes to what I have been saying for contracts in football and baseball nowadays too, where there are guys who are getting big money contracts who do not deserve them. Trevor Lawrence did not deserve the big money contract that he got. Should he have gotten an extension? Yes, because Jacksonville wants to invest in him as their franchise quarterback, and they're doing.
But that's just the market, though. Daniel Jones got a big contract with the Giants, and now he got benched.
Exactly.
So
but it's
if you're giving an extension to your quarterback, you're going to have to pay a lot of money, and that's just kind of what the game dictates.
But that's the unfortunate thing of it too, that it's being dictated, because what I want is I would love to see one of these teams just go against the market and just be like, you know what, understandable, this is what the market says, but this is what your value is. You're getting paid this, take it or leave it, and have it out there. And if they sign it, great. But but I mean, with as far as Lawrence for the rest of the season, if you want to protect that investment and just get him right for next year, then I mean, you're pretty much. I don't think it's official, but they're pretty much out of playoff contention. They just have to get the final death note on it. But say you might as well just sit him for the rest of the year, I think, and let Mac Jones just play. I mean,
Let Mac Jones do Mac Jones things.
Yeah, I mean, poor guy. I think it's safe to say too. I saw a couple of tweets after the game on Sunday that said, "Can we all agree it wasn't the Patriots' fault and it was just Mac Jones is just not a good quarterback?" And I think it's safe to say Mac is. I feel bad because I had faith in the guy at one point, but he's just not good. And it goes to what I've said before about Alabama quarterbacks coming into the league, but just not the right coaching there, and something's got to change, and they've got to bring in somebody. And also, Shad needs to tell his son Tony to stop fighting with fans and former players on Twitter because he's. I could go into a whole thing about Tony Khan and how terrible he is at running a pro wrestling company too, but that's for another time.
I mean, listen.
But it bleeds into what he does with the Jaguars too.
Ironically enough, I think Belichick goes to the Jaguars next year.
I saw something about that earlier today that he might be the guy, and and they would give him total control, especially because this is what would happen, and especially with Tony, with how much of a fanboy he is about certain things, and he would just gush over the moon about Belichick for hours until his dad's like, "All right, it
sounds like a move that the Cons would make."
Yeah,
and poor Mac Jones.
No. It'd be hysterical if they're like, bring Matt Patricia in too.
But, speaking of, I know that you mentioned, he's a Super Bowl winning coach and they got enamored by it. Speaking of former Super Bowl winning coaches, I know that we have, kind of a timeline of what we put in text, but I wanted to harp on something you said.
Yeah.
Another Super Bowl winning coach that has not had a good season, has not had a good tenure at his current stop. And, what's going on there? Should they punt on the season? The Dallas Cowboys, Mike McCarthy. I said last year that I didn't think that Mike McCarthy should have been retained in Dallas. I mean, I'd like to say that I was right last year, and I'm looking more right this year. And so the Dallas Cowboys is basically a lost season for them. They got blown out on Monday night against Houston. Yes, Dak is out for the year, but what is going on with the Dallas Cowboys? Mike McCarthy. First off, the stadium was falling apart pregame. I don't know if you saw that. and kudos to the Texans on their social media with the look out below with the pieces of the stadium falling in the shape of an L.
Yeah,
so good job trolling there.
Well, with CD last week complaining about the sun, and then they put up curtains for the Tyson Paul fight.
Yeah, so they have curtains there. So there's a lot of things going on, and ironically, I've said this about the Jets that Woody Johnson wants to be Jerry Jones, and he wants to try to be everything that he is. He wants to meddle with everything. Jerry Jones is also their GM, so is Woody Johnson just not going to hire a GM and he's just going to try to be the GM while he's also an ambassador? I mean, what the hell's going on? But when it comes to the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy got hired. He's a former Super Bowl winning coach. This team has, I think they won the division last year, if I'm not mistaken, because I think you can fact check me on that. It was either them or the Eagles that won it last year. I know, they made the playoffs last year. I think they actually won a playoff game last year and lost in the second round because they got Dak got that monkey off his back last year. As I said, fact check me on the 2023 Dallas Cowboys. I'm not 100% sure on everything I'm saying.
You are correct. FoxSports.com, 2023 Dallas Cowboys, 12-5 record.
Okay. Yeah, so they're 12-5 last year. This year, I think that they're 3-9 right now.
I think so. Yeah,
something like that. So, you still have guys like CD Lamb. Jake Ferguson got a concussion, was knocked out of the game last night. But you let Tony Pollard walk in free agency this year.
Excuse me, they are 3-7 right now.
3-7. Sorry, they're probably going to wind up 3-9 in 2 weeks.
Yep, probably.
But they have not won a game at home this year. Jake Paul has more wins at, Dallas Stadium than the Cowboys do this year. But they Mike McCarthy is not going to be the coach of Dallas Cowboys next year, I would assume. But it's just seems like a lost season for them, and it's a team that every year they think that it's their year. We always see the memes every year. Dallas Cowboys started back. This is our year,
Mm-hmm.
but what do you think has gone wrong in Dallas this year? And what do you think they do? And they're not a team that ever fires their coach mid-season. I don't see them
No.
firing McCarthy in the middle of the season. I think that they will part ways with him at the end of the season. But what do you think's going on with them?
I mean, number one, public enemy number one, as far as it goes for problems for that team, is Jerry. Jerry has been the GM for too long, and I'm sure people have told him he needs to step away, but he will stay owner and general manager of that team until he dies. I believe that. And that's the sad. Now, he's gotten some good players for them, sure, but he doesn't know when to step down. And it also doesn't help that, well, McCarthy can put together a good strategy and has, he's won a Super Bowl in the past and he has been a good coach. He just doesn't have it this time around. And I think they need to buck their trend of Buck. We're using Buck a lot today for I like it. But they need to go against what they've done normally, and I think they got to cut him loose before the season's done and give somebody else the reins for that position. And then when the offseason rolls around, go after if they want to try and go after Belichick, even though now he may be linked to Jacksonville, or go at Mike Vrabel as like two of the guys who are just sitting on the couch at home and who have been great coaches to themselves. I think go after them if they want to, try and go in college, go after them. If he wants to stay in state, go after Steve Sarkisian at Texas. But they need a new face as the head coach. Jerry needs to really seriously consider stepping back from his general manager role and just be an owner. I think those are the two glaring offenses this year for the Cowboys.
I think that's something interesting you said, is that Jerry as the owner GM, I think it's just been going on for too long, and I think that he never will, but I think he should step back and hire an actual GM. Even if it's just like his son or something like that he, some younger eyes on it. He's doing a little too much, and he might just be losing a step. I know that he's butted heads with a lot of guys in the past, whether it be his coaches or players or what the case is. And, it's just, he wants to like do certain things. He's like, oh, we know what way the sun goes. Okay, well then why don't you put the shades down during the game and it's not in your player's eyes? What what's going on? It's just it's a lost season for the Cowboys, just like it's a lost season for the Jets. They're probably the two of the biggest disappointments in the NFL this year for sure. Especially with the way that the Cowboys were last year at 12-5, and the Jets with their aspirations this year. I think that we can both agree that they're two of the biggest disappointments this year. Speaking of disappointing seasons, team wise, but not player wise, the Bengals put on an all-time show on Sunday night, coming back down, what is it, 21-6 or
Something like that, yeah.
27-6. And they wind up losing the game late to the Chargers. So it's not the same old Chargers, first off. So Jim Harbaugh has them in check. But Joe Burrow's having himself one hell of a season, and the Bengals just seem to be wasting his talent overall.
Yeah.
They made it to a Super Bowl, but outside of that, they've kind of just been irrelevant outside of that. They made the playoffs, but it's just they don't seem to be able to put it together on defense. They're letting up a lot of points. His statistical numbers are fantastic. Him and Jamar Chase have one of those connections. The owners don't seem to really want to pay the players. That's why Jamar Chase held out of training camp. The till T Higgins thing, are they going to pay T Higgins? Just pay both of them, because when both of them are on the field, that offense is completely different than any other week. Because when it's just one of them, Jamar Chase can't really seem to get open because they're double teaming him. And then what are you going to do? When both of them are on the field, it's a problem. Joe
Mhm.
Burrow has options. He can get the ball to both of them. And that team puts up points, puts up numbers. And Chase Brown is looking like a great young running back as well. So they really have a lot of offensive weapons. Their defense can't really seem to put it together at the same time. But Joe Burrow's putting together almost an MVP type sort of season. But, he probably won't win it just because the team's not winning. If in one score games, almost all their games are one score games. And I think they're like, 1-6 in one score games. If you flip those scores around, they're sitting almost at the one seed, putting up against the Bills and the Chiefs for the top seed in the AFC.
Yeah, and crazy stat I saw today is Joe Burrow. I think it said Joe Burrow is the first quarterback in the modern era of the NFL to have 3 games in a season where he has thrown at least 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and lose all of those games. And right now he's at 27 touchdown passes, only 5 picks, and he's got over 3,000 yards already. I think it's at this point in the season, it's him. I think it was him, Holmes, and Brady have each done that at some point. And again, he should be the front runner for the
I mean,
MVP
it's
right
good
now.
company, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And he's been one of the top quarterbacks in the league ever since he's come in. And he should,
Outside of his injuries.
yeah, exactly. And he should be the front runner for the MVP. Obviously, the team record can unfortunately be a factor in seeing if you are going to be the MVP or not. But it's something where it's upsetting to see that, and especially with the talent and the rumors that Jamar Chase may walk after this year, and they may not have T. Higgins after this year. He might get traded, or he might walk too. Those are two huge weapons, the top two weapons for the passing game for the Bengals. And I mean, I think Burrow's good enough where they can at least he can at least elevate everybody else with his play. But if I'm the Bengals front office, I'm starting to look for receiver prospects in the draft and other free agents, because if my top 2 guys aren't coming back, I got to do something to try and make sure that my quarterback has enough resources around him where we can still try and succeed and turn things around for the better.
Yeah, but at the same time, the issue with that is if you have to try and restock the receiver room, guess what? That defense that's letting up too many points is not going to get any better.
Yeah, and that's
So
the other thing. Yeah.
so when really what you should do is secure your assets and then focus on the defensive side of things, because if Joe Burrow is putting up those numbers and he has not turned the ball over as much, he's only has 5 interceptions on the whole season through 11 weeks, and the fact that they're not winning games, that just tells you how bad their defense has really been.
Yeah.
So you need to focus on that defensive side of the ball, and if you have to put all your attention on fixing keeping the offensive side of the ball clicking, then you can't focus on the defense, and then you're still going to be having the same problem. So if you have stuff in house that you can, retain and keep in place, do it. Newsflash, you have the pieces. Focus on it. I don't know
Exactly.
what they're not seeing. They're just being stingy. But sticking in that division, another classic matchup. You had the Steelers Ravens game. The Steelers beat the Ravens in an upset without scoring a touchdown. This is not the first time the Steelers have won a game
No,
without
no,
scoring a
it's
touchdown
not.
this year.
Which is amazing. And it's, I know a couple of weeks ago we had a discussion about pretenders and contenders, and I had put the Steelers in pretenders at that point in time, but my foot is
And
in
I
my
think that
mouth
was
on that.
before Wilson was starting too.
Yes, yeah, that was when they had Fields starting. But yeah, I mean, my foot is I guess I firmly inserted my foot in my mouth with that one. So, but it's something that we've joked, like, yeah, Tomlin's never gonna fall below 500 in his career. He still hasn't, which is fantastic. But this team finds ways to win, and they're creative. And this was a very creative way of just no touchdowns. They're like, we're just gonna do all this, and they pulled off the win against a huge division rival.
Absolutely. And those teams always play each other tough. But you look at the Ravens, they have now lost to the Steelers and the Browns. So that's 2 divisional matchups that
Mm-hmm.
they've dropped. But they beat the Bengals twice, both one-score games. As I said, those Bengals one-score games
Yeah.
are just all-timers. But you look at the Steelers, and they're one of those teams, they started the season out, they had Justin Fields starting, like, oh, they're not going to win that many games. And then they go on a tear, and then Russell Wilson comes in. Oh, why are they changing something that's doing so well? Oh wait, they, I don't think they've lost a game since Russell Wilson started.
No.
I think,
I don't
and
think so.
that defense, it's the return of the steel curtain. I mean,
Mhm.
they're just shutting teams down, and you're like, okay, the Steelers are the Steelers. Like it is classic Steelers football. I mean, they're playing great defense, they're keeping games close, and Tomlin is solidifying that he is one of the top coaches in this league, and they're doing everything right. Once again, that's one of those cultures. They have that culture there, and as long as players are buying into it, you will win the games. And kudos to them for getting everything in line and getting everything together. And I don't think that the Ravens' magic has run out. I think that I saw some plays in that game, whether it's bouncing right off receivers' chests or what the case is. But it's that those games are always hotly
Mhm.
contested. I think that they're always going to be close matchups. And, whenever this, always bet the underdog in that game. That is for sure, because it's always going to be a tight game. It's never going to be a blowout in any sense of the matter.
Yeah, and mentioning that too with those matchups. I mean, Lamar Jackson, I mean, he's two-time MVP for a reason. And we saw it. He's able to extend plays with his legs and really do a good job with improvising to get the most out of something to try and give them the best opportunity. We saw it with that touchdown pass to Zay Flowers too. And it just fell short in the end. The Steelers, despite not scoring any touchdowns, as you said, found a way to win in that one. And I think with those defenses that the Steelers have had in the past, like with the Mean Joe Green or Troy Polamalu or James Harrison, for a while now, it's been TJ Watt as the guy on that defense. And it's just they've anchored themselves around him and have been able to be very successful. I don't think they're at the level of scary defense as they were, especially in our lifetimes, with like Polamalu and Harrison being some of those key guys on that side of the ball. But I think it's safe to say they're close to that. I mean, if you have anything else on that, I got a little thing we can move to the next part with just mentioning Russell Wilson too. But speaking of a former team of his, but again, if you have anything about the Steelers you want to say before we move to that,
No, I'm good to move to our next topic, and then we
yeah,
could talk about our teams and kind of, close out from there.
yeah. So going to the former team for Russell Wilson, then the Denver Broncos, the Denver Broncos. I can't speak today, apparently. Oh, I sound like Squirrely Dan and Letterkenny. The Denver Broncos. It seems that maybe not Broncos country is riding, but Bo Nix himself is definitely riding and putting up a sneaky good rookie season so far as the quarterback for that team.
Yeah, I mean he's put together a nice little season. His first few weeks, it took him a little while to get going, but I mean they really put it to he really put it to Atlanta this last week. I thought that was a really impressive win that they put together. I think Peyton finally has that team riding. I think that we should say
Yep.
pretty high. Bo Nix is putting together a sneaky good season as well. He seems to have a pretty good connection with Cortland Sutton now. As I said, it took a little while for that connection to really get going. Ironically, it was the kind of the Jets game. I feel like that was really his coming out party, where he was able to win a game without really doing much, but he was able to manage it and then really put together that game winning drive at the end, and kind of seal the game. And then the week after, he really had a really good game, and then he seems to be kind of piling them together. I don't know if he's really put together a full case for offensive rookie of the year yet, but I think that he's definitely putting himself into some early talks to be in the mix for it.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels obviously has those flashier plays in Washington, and some bigger uh, stat lines overall. But I think that Bo Nix is definitely putting himself in the early conversations.
Yeah, and looking at it, according to ESPN here, looking at his stats right now, after this week on the season, he's got a 65.5 completion percentage through 11 games, 2,275 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 6 picks so far. So just a little over half an advantage for touchdowns to interceptions on that. But a guy who I had said when it was draft discussion was a second round, maybe later round talent who is going to get drafted in the first round. And maybe with how he's been playing, maybe it's starting to look like where he was picked was probably the right spot for him. And the talent may look like it matched that pick. I mean, the time will tell for the rest of the season and for the rest of his career. But if he can continue on the track that he's on, I'd say, we said beginning of the season, and that was the debate for a long time. It's been between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, but I think Bo Nix is going to make it pretty interesting. If it has to come down to the three of them, it comes down to the three of them. But if he can usurp one of them and make a really strong case for him, we might see an upset, huge upset for Offensive Rookie of the Year if it works out that way.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I think that Jaden Daniels is definitely the front runner. I think Caleb Williams, hasn't been in the best situation. I think that with the offensive coordinator that they had was really hamstringing him, trying to do too much. He definitely put together a good week this week against Green Bay. They came very close to upsetting Green Bay, but fell a little short. He's definitely played very well in the fourth quarter. I know it was heartbreaking for Johnny. He was looking at it saying, "Oh my," and then it just fell very short. That blocked field goal at the very end. He's put together some very good end of game drives. Caleb Williams has, but it's definitely showing flashes in Chicagoland for Caleb Williams, but overall, I think that is definitely Jaden Daniels' award to lose. But we're only 11 weeks into the season. We still have a little time.
Oh yeah.
For a lot of weird things to happen, so we never know what's going to happen yet. But that being said, let's move on to just talking about our miserable existences with our teams quickly. I know we spoke a little bit about the Jets to start the show because of the breaking news of the day, but Nikki, what were your takeaways from the Patriots this past weekend? I know it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, it was a little ugly. But I will say for positives out of that, I mean, again, Drake May continues to do something that shows improvement every week. I also want to shout out Ben Brown, the center who they picked up to replace David Andrews this year too, because I mean, the offensive line deservedly has gotten a lot of flack this year and last year, but Brown has impressed me. And I think with this game, especially, he's really showed a lot of impressive stuff with his pass and run blocking, and not just stationary in his position, but going outside of his position, either side of the line, and making that block to give Ramondre Stevenson extra room to run, or give Drake May a little more time, or just do something, or downfield a little more, give a receiver an extra path too. So I think he's been doing a really good job with that. And I want to see more improvement out of him, whether if it's just for the rest of this season and then he's relegated to backup when David Andrews comes back next season after his injury, then so be it. But I like that. And also, I mean, the big man touchdown to Vidarian Lowe in the third quarter was just that was awesome to see. And
everyone always loves a big man touchdown.
Oh, who doesn't love it? We've had a lot of big man touchdowns this year too, I think. But he even talked about it at his post game press conference. Even though they lost, he was still really excited. He said, I was hoping I would catch a pass. I never thought I would catch a touchdown pass in my entire career. So you could tell he was over the moon about that. But it's with the whole thing. I mean, they had the chance, that final drive where it was a 2-minute drill. And it was a big test for Drake at that point. He had the 1-minute drive that tied up against Tennessee a couple of weeks ago. And this was going to be another huge test. If he checked that box off, would have, I think, given him an even bigger step ahead. Unfortunately, underthrew Demario Douglas, but at the same time, the blame is also on Demario Douglas because he should have turned around to see where the ball was going. And if he had seen that it was shorter, he could have tried to make an adjustment to his route to go to the ball. At the very most, at the very least, break up the pass so that way it's not a pick. But hindsight's 20/20, and unfortunately, it was the game-sealing interception. You had that, his only one, but also you had a fumble earlier in the game. The turnovers were the ones that cost them the game. We did see the return of Christian Barmore this season too. In that game, he's been out all year so far with blood clots. So finally, he was cleared and he was able to play, which is awesome to see. It was a huge boost to the defense, hopefully. And Drake is also the first Patriots quarterback to throw for 100-plus yards and 1 touchdown in the first quarter since one Tom Brady on October 21st, 2019 against, I'm going to give you one guess who that team was.
I'm only going to guess it was the Jets. I don't
Yes.
know who else it would be.
You are correct, sir. And another note, too, in that for the Rams side of the ball, Matthew Stafford got his 370th career touchdown pass in the game. So still going. I think he can hit 400 before he's done. He's still got more in the tank where he can do that. But now the next game is going to be for the Patriots will be Sunday at 1 in Miami. They lost 15-10 in Week 5 against them at home. That was Jacoby Brissett's final start. So this will be Miami's first look at Drake May live. I'm sure they have seen the film on him so far, but it'll be interesting to see how Drake does in that environment. Maybe he can turn the Patriots' luck around in playing in Miami. Who knows?
Yeah, and how would you just this late into the season, how would you say Gerard Mayo's been as the first-year head coach for you?
I think he's doing okay. I mean, he acknowledged that it's a rebuild year, so I think they're on pace with kind of what you would expect from a rebuild. But I think he's okay. There's been a lot of people calling for his job and calling for Alex Van Pelt's job, the offensive coordinator, and it's just like, you gotta. I'm seeing now what it is to be in this situation after being. But
you guys aren't used to it anymore.
No, it's still. But I'm recognizing that after 20 plus years of dominance and being highly spoiled, that this is what it's like to be in this this other side of the coin. But it's something where just media fans back off these guys. Let the staff stay as is next year, and just let them keep doing this. It's if they have like a 5-year plan in place, you can't abandon ship after one. You got to at least let them do a couple to see how this get a couple of years in to see how things can play out. Because you never know what's going to happen. Next year, they may turn it around and win the division. Who knows?
For sure. And then, for me going into the bye week, I was hoping that for the Jets side of things, it's just, as I said earlier, the Jets are officially off of life support. They have completely flatlined. It was just, I thought that they had a win sealed, and then they just let Anthony Richardson just march down the field, run a second touchdown, and man was benched for getting tired for running a play. And he pulled himself out of the game, and he's like, I'm tired. I'm going to take a blow. And then he got benched for a week after that. 2 weeks later, he runs for 2 touchdowns against the Jets and puts the nail in the coffin. They have, as of this morning, a 4% chance of making the playoffs. I don't know how that's even possible. I would give them a 0.00000% chance of making the playoffs. This team stinks. The ownership stinks. The coaching stinks. The offense stinks. Aaron Rodgers stinks. He stinks. He's an old man. He looks bad. He looks terrible.
Take him out
The
behind
whole
the shed.
the whole thing has blown up in their faces. Everything has just imploded on itself. If this season had happened last year with him not tearing his Achilles, and this sort of output happened last year, I could only imagine what would have transpired. I couldn't even tell you what could have happened if this was last season, and this is the result that we got. The team actually looked pretty good. They had some tackles. They actually tackled. I guess that presentation that Jeff Ulbrich put together did something.
Yeah.
Even though Sauce Gardner, we don't need no presentation. Apparently it did, because at the presentation, you guys look better at tackling, believe it or not. But the game plans just haven't looked all that good on either side of the ball, to be honest. Ulbrich's been over his head, as I said, as interim head coach. It just has not been. It just hasn't been good. It just hasn't been good. I'm just numb to everything. On the bright side, they can't lose this week. But if you could bet against a team on the bye week, I'd bet against the Jets this week.
I was gonna say I was gonna say off air this weekend too that all four of our teams lost this weekend. I forgot that the Giants were on a bye week this week, but I mean, so if you want to throw
Yeah,
them in the
and I
mix
mean,
too, it's
look
Jaguars,
at it.
Browns. You know,
The Giants bench Daniel Jones. I'm sure that Tony will have his viewpoint on that. With Tommy Cutlets is coming back. Tommy DeVito is coming back. He will be starting. They're
is he gonna have to put the cutlets aside for the Thanksgiving dinner though? That's the big question.
I'm sure he'll have his thoughts on that, but that will do it for me and Nikki here on Next Man Up. It's been a good time chatting with you. I hope that everyone has bared with us to the end here. As I said, I'm sure Tony will have his thoughts on the Giants and the benching of Daniel Jones and where the Giants go from here.
Hello, listeners of Next Man Up. It's been a wild time for me personally. I've been enjoying this wonderful time in my life on paternity leave with my beautiful daughter who's actually in my arms as we speak. This is her first ever podcast recording experience. She seems to just want to pull the wires and, yank the mic or break something that daddy's using. But so far, she seems pretty into it. So I think that's a good sign. I had to hop on here to discuss the current state of the Giants, and I had to bring my daughter to make me feel better because it's such a dark time in New York Giants football for many reasons. If you live under a rock and you haven't heard the news, the Giants are finally pulling the plug on Daniel Jones. And Tommy DeVito will be starting for us this Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and conceivably Thanksgiving, depending on how it goes. So, how the hell did we get here? What does it all mean? Is this really, really the bottom for Giants football? And how should fans really feel? First, I'll just try and talk about how I feel, and then maybe fans can make their own decisions. I like Tommy DeVito. I felt that Jones had been doing so badly this year that it made sense for him to be demoted. I think I even said it on the show. If he's not going to get us to the next level and he's not going to be here next year, either trade him, which they just didn't do, could have done a few weeks ago, cut him or bench him. Have him playing on scout team. He's crying to the media. He's, of course, showing all class, much like when Eli was benched for Geno Smith. This feels like this level of just bottom. Obviously, Daniel Jones is not Eli Manning, but that moment where ownership clearly intervened with management before changes were made, and they benched Eli Manning, went through ruining his streak just to fire everybody a week later. It just you get the sense that Giants ownership brass is struggling right now. I like the Mara family. I like the Tisch family. I think they have a lot of great values and they do a lot of good charity work. And I think they're ultimately loyal to a brand of Giants football that have transcended many generations, including their own family. But the brand is dead right now. And it could change if you replace the quarterback with somebody generational. But I think there's something more going on here. We've had a lot of different coaches. We've had a lot of different GM, probably maybe even another GM or coach coming soon. Who knows? We've had so many changes since Tom Coughlin rejected John Mara a handshake. It makes you wonder if this generation of ownership, Mara's obviously third generation, is qualified to handle this. Again, I think he's a great man. He's a good dude. I think he knows more than some owners in this league. But the Giants right now are supposed to be better than this. New York football as a whole is supposed to be better than this. With the exception of one playoff season, this whole group has been a disaster. Now, the funny thing is, if they hadn't made the playoffs that season and the Giants got to draft the quarterback of their choosing the following year, we might not even be having this conversation. So does it make sense for the ownership to stand pat and stick with the GM and coach, give them the quarterback of their choosing? Or will he do one, not the other? There's a lot of mixed things going on right now. I think the most concerning stuff are the stories and reports from the players who were hurt by how they're treating Daniel Jones, the Dexter Lawrences of the world, the leaders of the team who are ultimately disappointed in how we're treating another leader on our team. So I got nothing but love for Danny Jones. Obviously, we didn't like. I think his press conference was perfect the way he addressed it. He worked his tail off. He paid him a lot of money. He got injured. He never lived up to the money. He never came back really strong from the injury. It's okay. It happens. But where do the Giants go forward from here? I'd like them to part ways with Joe Shane. I think it's time. I've said this on the show. How do you come back from the Barkley drama? How do players like you after you traded or didn't pay the best player on the team just for him to play you twice a year, kick your butt, and honestly excel even further, and just give yourself that extra level of enthusiasm from your rival, who already has enough enthusiasm to wipe the floor with us for the last decade. I saw a meme that when Daniel Jones was being benched, that the Cowboys and Eagles are holding up a banner for Daniel Jones. As sad as that is, it's true. They've owned us throughout this entire era. It's time for changes. I still like Brian Dable. I still like Tommy DeVito. And we'll have so much to discuss throughout the offseason. But I think last year it was clear the Giants' policy was they don't tank. And I think ownership intervening and saying, Locke, you stink. DeVito, you're in, is his way of saying, screw you. I let you guys make all these decisions. You brought in Locke as a way of saying you still believe in Jones. Now that you don't believe in Jones, I don't even believe in Locke. So screw you. That's essentially what ownership just did. And now there's even more pressure on Tommy DeVito, who's going to have a lore with his hand gestures and his agent. He's an interesting fella, this Stiletto. He obviously has some interesting tastes. But the point I'm trying to make is there's going to be a huge distraction with DeVito. And if he doesn't perform well, and he doesn't at least do his thing like we saw him do last year, and the whole thing blows up, at least you're in a better position to draft a quarterback, and this room is probably going to be fair. All three of these guys, four of these guys will not be in the quarterback room next year, unless somebody plays so exceptionally in the next month or two that they earn themselves a spot at camp. Is that something some Giants fans want? We seem divided. I think a lot of Giants fans, especially in the Northeast, like Tommy DeVito because he's a good kid who tries hard, and he brought a little excitement to us last year. If you're anti-tanking, you probably like this move. If you're pro-tanking and you just fixated on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or focusing on what the Giants are going to have next year, I'll ask you this. What makes you think this organization is going to get it right next year? I don't know. I would like to see DeVito do well. I'd like to see him earn a spot next year. And no matter where our record is or where we stand in Tankathon, you got 15 2-3 win teams. Give me a break. You want to try and be the number one tank? Go ahead. But you're just going to end up being disappointed. Somebody's going to get a weird win. We saw Cleveland Browns win on Thursday Night Football this past, I'm a little behind on this recording, but the Cleveland Browns are making things interesting in Tankathon starting the next week. So just pointing it out there. Tanking is not an exact science. The Giants really are starting from the ground up. I'd stick with the coach unless something happens in the next couple of months that make me lose belief in him. I'd move on from Shane. I'd promote Brandon Brown from within. And I would ask Mr. Dable, who do you think we should get and how should we get him, whether it's free agency or the draft, and just listen to the guy. Listen to him. Obviously, they tried listening to him last year for Daniels, but they were in a position where they couldn't get him due to the nature of the draft in this quarterback class. Could be different this year. If Jacksonville's number one, what are they going to do with Trevor Lawrence? There are some different scenarios. We'll see. But Giants fans, I guess if you're eating your Thanksgiving dinner, you can add chicken cutlets to the menu. I guess if you're on Sunday and it goes so bad that we're even over Tommy DeVito before Thanksgiving, forget the cutlets. Just go in there, expect nothing. Do not expect to win. See what happens. I think DeVito's going to give us a little juice and give the fans a little something to cheer about. But at the end of the day, we're going to be looking at probably 4 or 5 win season, and we're going to be sitting in a tough spot at the end of the year. Giants fans, hang on. I've seen a lot of you leave for Buffalo. I've seen a lot of you just forget watching the games. And even my own daughter, her first year of life. This is the Giants football that she gets. Sophie, what do you think? Can the Giants come back? You hear that? You hear that acid reflex? I don't know if that's a good sign. We're chewing right now because we're teething, so Papa's got to go. But coming next, you got Big Chris and Nikki G running through the whole Next Man Up show. Obviously, they're carrying the torch. Just like football and just like our show, it must go on. People step up. The next man up, the next person up should step up and help our team. And in that case, it's Nikki and Chris helping me out while I'm enjoying this time with my daughter, who cooperated for 10 full minutes on this recording. Thank you, honey. Thank you very much. As always, go Giants, be well, and never give up.